So Joe Biden's Supreme Court nominee, Ketanji Brown Jackson, is nearly on the bench. She's going through confirmation hearings in the upcoming week, and if all goes according to regular Washington business, she will get a place on the United States Supreme Court, and she will be a liberal progressive rubber stamp for the next 30 years because she's a young woman. She's not going to retire anytime soon, which is a big problem. We have huge cases that are going to be coming down the pike, cases on, obviously, abortion coming up this term. We're going to have LGBT cases. We're going to have religious liberty cases. We're going to be having gun cases. We're going to be having cases that deal with the power of the federal government, whether it can expand its powers without limit. All of these things are going to be adjudicated in the coming years. You can bet on it. So it's of utmost concern that we keep a conservative majority on the Supreme Court, and in fact, we keep growing the conservative majority on the Supreme Court. If Biden gets this woman on, she will be a green light, a rubber stamp for all big government, liberal, progressive, socially liberal policies that you can think of. Democrats bat 1,000 when it comes to getting progressives on the bench, whereas Republicans are like, batting 500. It's about one out of two of their judicial nominees turn out to be just complete disasters and closet liberals later on. So we need to stop this lady, and it's not going to happen through the political process. The Republicans are afraid of the mainstream media. They're afraid of being called racist. They're afraid of being called sexist. They're afraid that voters are going to think them, not tolerant enough, not accepting enough, not doing enough to advance the cause of minorities and women on the bench. So they're only going to put up token resistance. They're going to put up enough resistance to appease you voters at home, while at the same time not giving Ketanji Brown Jackson a hard time, a thorough vetting, and asking her serious questions and putting up real resistance to her becoming a fixture of the Supreme Court for the next decades. They're not going to do it. The political process is broken. We saw that they treated Sonia Sotomayor with kid gloves during her nomination proceedings. They're afraid of the mainstream media and their power to control a sheepish American people's thoughts. They're afraid that those people are going to think them racist. They're essentially just going to put up resistance for the sake of their donors, for the sake of their constituency, so that they can look like they're doing something while really doing nothing. They're threading the needle. They're trying to be political. So this will not be stopped through the political process. Bet on it. Just bet on it. There is a silver bullet, though, to stopping this young radical woman from being put on the bench. And I've already addressed kind of the pragmatic concerns. Why should she not be placed on the bench? It's because she's going to be a liberal rubber stamp. Just like we know Kagan, we know how Sotomayor is gonna vote, we know how Kagan's going to vote, we knew how Ginsburg was going to vote. We just do, because they're not real jurists. What they are progressive ideologues who are using the cover of the judicial branch of government to usher in a new agenda. They're going to legislate from the bench. So that's a big pragmatic concern. But there's something that's more important than that. If we resign ourselves to living in an America where a sitting president of the United States can say that he is selecting somebody for the Supreme Court of the United States based on their color and based on their sex, we have lost our country. If we are in a place where we are so cowed, where we're so weak, emasculated, neutered, that we won't stand up and say, you are not going to outright say, I am putting a black woman on the Supreme Court, not because she happens to be the best candidate for this very prestigious position, but because she's black and because she is a woman. If that's the America we're living in, we have lost. It's going to be over, at least my cold, dead body, that I resign myself to living in an America like that. In the minute where people hear that and they're not automatically up in arms, they're not just thoroughly rattled and disgusted that the president's going to engage in open racism, open identity politics, saying that discriminating against every other class of human being aside from black women for this job, for this position that, everybody would like to have. Every jurist, everybody going to law school, it's their dream. Oh yeah, one day that would be really great if I could be on the Supreme Court. And no one actually thinks they're going to attain it. But to selectively say, I'm just going to pick this class or race of person to put on the Supreme Court is disgusting. It's despicable. If we've gotten to the point where people are so lobotomized, they're so opiated by government propaganda, by progressive propaganda, that we can create a tiered society with certain racial classes and certain sexual classes on top and others on the bottom, then we have lost our country. And that is a huge problem. The principle of it is disgusting. So we need to fight this, not just because we don't want a liberal jurist that's sitting there haunting the halls of the Supreme Court for 3 decades. We need to fight this so we can take back our America. We need to take back the American ideal of a meritocracy where the best jurist is going to be placed on the Supreme Court, not the one whose skin happens to be the politically correct color at this time. Not the one who doesn't have a Y chromosome, so like good for her. It needs to be the strongest jurist who is going to interpret the Constitution and the laws of the United States most faithfully, and we don't have that. So just forget the pragmatics of it. We need to fight this tooth and nail so we can keep our country, so we can keep the American spirit alive. And it's dying right in front of us. We are so brainwashed by BLM and Antifa propaganda and by the racial class warfare that's going on right now by the new left, by new Marxists who are trying to incite not, the bourgeoisie versus the proletarian in the sense of true class warfare. They're turning race into a set of classes, and they're putting white versus black, black versus white, and they're dividing us along color basis because obviously America doesn't really have true classes that you would see in real Marxism, in classical European Marxism. We skip that. The middle class is too big and expansive in America. We can't be divided on those lines. So they've transitioned. Now they're using racial warfare. So how do we keep this lady off the Supreme Court? What's the magic bullet? You go through the judicial process. You take her to court. What Biden did is unlawful. It's unconstitutional. We have a constitution in America, and that constitution guarantees that you can't discriminate on the basis of race and sex. It's right there under the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. We know that racial discrimination is offensive to it. We know that racial discrimination offends the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, and that has been settled in a case called Bowling versus Sharp. That was settled. It's Supreme Court precedent. So we can say that kind of equal protection has been subsumed at the federal level into the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment. In another landmark case, and this is called Regents of the University of California versus Bakke, we said that racial quotas in a medical school were not constitutional. When the state of California tried to say we're going to set aside seats, or a seat, for people of certain color, for black people entering into medical school, and they're going to be judged on their own criteria, and kind of there'll be a certain part of the class that will be reserved for them, very analogously to what's happening with Ketanji Brown Jackson and Biden. The Supreme Court said that you cannot do this thing. It offends the Constitution of the United States to have overt racial favoritism like that, where you're setting aside a seat and making it essentially a racial quota. What Biden has done here is to create essentially a 1/9 of the Supreme Court racial sexual quota, i.e., he's putting on a black woman. He's saying this seat is reserved for a black woman. The same way that the University of California was saying that these 16 seats are reserved for black people, and you can't do that. As a matter of fact, the federal government, pursuant to the Fifth Amendment and due process, the Supreme Court has said that if the states can't do something, then the federal government, which is really kind of the pinnacle of American government, at least in the modern system, in the post-Civil War United States, then it certainly can't do something. So if the states aren't allowed to discriminate, then the federal government most especially can't set a racial quota. And that we need to take the Biden administration to court. We need, really, anyone can do this. There will be an issue with what's called standing, the ability to sue, having an actionable controversy to take to court. But surprisingly, the Constitution doesn't put down any requirements for who can serve as a Supreme Court justice. But I would say some lawyer out there just needs to file suit on the basis of racial discrimination, on the basis of the Fifth Amendment, against Ketanji Brown Jackson, against the Biden administration, and we could probably get an injunction to stop this. That's the magic bullet. It's not going to happen through the wimpy, spineless Republicans in the political process. First of all, Democrats have 50 senators plus the tie-breaking vote anyway. So it's not going to happen through the political process no matter what. But Republicans, even if we could siphon off a Democrat senator here and there, Republicans still aren't going to do it. We're still going to have the rhinos that allow, that put forth this judicial cancer onto the Supreme Court. She will be pushed through. Mark my words. So it's up to us. We need some attorney, some brave attorney who has the means to do this, to file suit, and we need an injunction. We need some federal district court to say, hold up, hold the process. This seems violative of the Fifth Amendment. It seems violative of due process. It seems violative of equal protection. And therefore, we are going to stop this. We're going to stop this lady from going forward on the Supreme Court because her selection is discriminatory. It's discrimination against everybody. But let's face it, it's discrimination against white males. This secret, the wink and nod of, oh, black woman. We're going to put a black woman on because they're saying it's the opposite of white male. Stopping this Supreme Court nominee is something that we really have the power to do. It's not far-fetched that a federal district judge would step in and be like, this is violative on its face of the Fifth Amendment. This is a clear violation of due process and equal protection. The president, we know that a president, what he says on the campaign trail, what he says in his presidential promises can actually be used in court to evidence what his motives were for doing something when he is president. That actually happened in the Trump administration. Some courts looked, when analyzing the legality of what Trump was doing, looked at his campaign promises and the reasons that he gave for doing them as evidence of maybe an invidious motive here and there. So we know that can happen. So Biden's on the record saying, oh, I'm going to choose somebody that's because they're black, because they're a woman for the Supreme Court, because it's high time that we had a black woman on the Supreme Court. So the evidence is strong. We can go back to the record. We can go back to the campaign. We can look at that and say what his motive is and say that that's an invidious and illicit motive for picking somebody. That's not a hard thing to do. And a district court judge will be keen on doing that. So all we need to do is a brave soul to rise up, to file a lawsuit, and then we have a chance. It's stopping this nomination, which would be devastating, mind you. If we stop this nomination in its tracks, then Biden's going to have to go through and vet somebody else, and it probably won't be some of the people he's pre-vetted because he pre-vetted black women. And if he chooses another black woman, then it's going to be maybe thrown out on the same grounds, on the same constitutional grounds. So he's going to have to re-vet a bunch of people. And there's a chance we could stall this till after the midterms so that, we're going to take back the Senate. It's likely the Republicans will take back the Senate. So we stall this person till after the midterms, and then he's going to have to play ball, Biden, and maybe pick somebody a lot more moderate than who he'd like to pick. So that's the way forward. Go to the courts. Lawyers out there, go to the courts. File your paperwork. File a complaint for racial discrimination, because you're a victim. I mean, it's not likely that some schlub lawyer, some schmuck out there is going to be put on the Supreme Court. But like I said, the Constitution doesn't put any requirements on who is fit for the Supreme Court. So any lawyer basically is being discriminated against by not being considered by the Biden administration as a candidate because they're not the right color, not the right sex. If you're some white guy lawyer, go file a complaint and we'll see if we can't stop this. But that is the last hope. We've got to take things to the courts because the political process is broken. The courts, in a weird way, are the most functional and wholesome part of the American Republic today. They've been infected and undermined somewhat, but they haven't been infected to the same degree that, say, just the legislative branch has. A lot of judges, even liberal judges, understand they have a duty to try and be objective. So I think take this to the courts, and let's see if we can't stop the nominee that way. But we're not going to do it through the political process. And I would just end here by quoting the Bakke case that says, when a classification denies an individual opportunities or benefits enjoyed by others solely because of his race or ethnic background, said classification must be regarded as suspect, and making distinctions between citizens solely because of their ancestry is odious to a free people whose institutions are founded upon the doctrine of equality. With that said, let's keep her off the bench. This is the blueprint for how to do it. It's our last hope. Thank you, guys.